Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Polaris-Live. This is your host, Sarwar Kashmeri, inviting you and my viewers from around the world to the series of conversations with global experts on the US-China relationship. Perhaps the most consequential foreign policy relationship of our time. This program is brought to you in conjunction with the Foreign Policy Association in New York. I have great pleasure today in having as my guest Professor Michele Geraci. He has a very long bio, and I hope I can do it justice in a few lines. So Professor Geraci is the finance professor at Zhejiang University. He's head of the economic policy program, Nottingham University Business School. Just as importantly, Professor Geraci used to be the undersecretary in the former Italian government. He was actually the driving force behind the Memorandum of Understanding, the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative Memorandum of Understanding between Italy and China. He has been a banker, an investment banker based in London for a number of well-known banks, Merrill Lynch, Schroders. He's fluent in Mandarin, in English, and Italian, Spanish, speaks French. But perhaps, I should say that he's appeared in all the big media, BBC, Al Jazeera, CCTV, and so on. But perhaps the best description I found of him was by one of his students who said that Professor Geraci is a scholarly expert with charisma. So would you please join me in welcoming Professor Geraci? Good morning, Michele. How are you?
Good morning to you, and thank you very much for your kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
So was he a student right? I know you have charisma, I can see it, but he's a scholarly expert with charisma. It was an accurate description of yours?
I think we try to, rather than teaching only students, try to involve them. And if that helped get the students involved in the topic, I'm happy that's what they think. It means they enjoy it.
Yeah, well, grazie mille for being here with me today. I want to start off by asking you, you had the foresight to help develop this Memorandum of Understanding between Italy and China, right? And I wanted to start by asking you, how has this worked out in practice? Can you give us a summary of the status of the MOU?
I'll tell you. Thank you. Yes, the MOU was something that when I joined the Italian government in 2018, I wanted to accelerate this process because I knew that Italy and Europe and the West needed to start to deal with China in a different way. And this Memorandum of Understanding is one of the many channels through which we try to engage positively, proactively with China. I did find that Italy was the country that was trading the least amount with China. Germany, France, England, Switzerland did much more, even in terms of inbound investment. Italy was the recipient of a small amount of Chinese investment. So I wanted to bring Italy back onto the table of the G7 country, as it is, and deal with what is the fastest growing, soon the biggest economy in the world. Now, the MOU is an agreement that is an option for the companies to take advantage of. We are a market economy. We cannot force company in Italy to do things. We just tell the company, if you want to do business in China, here the government is here to help, to protect. If there is an issue, you can raise it at government level, and we can deal with it at a higher level. Of course, it's a voluntary tool. No one is obliged to be part of the Belt and Road. No one is obliged to invest in China. But of course, there are opportunities together with the risk, of course. Now, you asked me what has happened, and
Hey, before you go there, I have a quick question before you go there. Pardon me, and that is, but I mean, absent the memorandum of understanding, there would be some pieces missing in what Chinese companies could do and investors could do. So I'm trying to connect what the memorandum of understanding actually provided as a benefit to small companies and Italian business people.
Thank you. No, that's exactly the key point. The Italian economy is made up of about 4.2 million small, medium enterprises, many of them less than 15 people. This was, I'm sure you agree, a strength in the 80s, the diversity of Italian manufacturing, artisan, shoemakers. This was great and gave Italy the great push in the 70s and 80s with fashion, cars, and everything you know about the made in Italy, and even machinery of high quality are less known to the general public.
Yes.
They really get the benefit of all this engineering and design mix. Now, in the year 2000, scale is now becoming more and more important. Paul Krugman, with his new trade theory, it doesn't say what I'm saying, but basically says it's almost a winner takes it all. And scale brings lower economies, better economies of scales, lower average cost. Low average cost means a higher cash buffer, and this extra cash can be reinvested. And so those who have scale can turn quantity into quality because they gain money and the money can be reinvested into research and development. Now, this is a big problem for these small, medium enterprises in Italy. They don't have the scale, they don't have the cash.
Right.
And so we need to aggregate them under a higher level umbrella that can give them, if not a scale, a virtual scale. And because we don't have scale in the Italian market, we try to, let's say, stimulate this growth by having them access a bigger market like China and the rest of Asia and the rest of the countries in the Silk Road route. And therefore,
so the memorandum of understanding acts kind of as an accumulator where you encourage small businesses to come to, let's say, a department in the Italian government, and then they put their ideas and their money together, and so that it becomes, is that the main purpose? And then the Chinese have opened up doors so that you can bring all of these together into China? Is that how it works?
Yes, because at the back of the memorandum, which was the final agreement, even earlier on, I had set up in the Ministry of Economic Development a task force China, exactly for what you say, aggregating company that will come and see me regularly. We'll have meetings, discuss opportunities, discuss the risks, try to aggregate. For example, the wine producer was one example. We have hundreds of varieties of wine. And I said, we really need to bring this under one Italian flag, just to sell Italian red wine from north and south, 6 varieties, north, center, and south, white and red. And I know this is a loss of the individual characteristic of the Italian wine that thrives in markets where people understand the finesse of the differences of these hundreds of varieties. But maybe not so in the case of China. So we said, listen, when we sell to more advanced market like in the United States, in Germany, the UK, and even France, we do still keep and want to keep this variety. But when we go to Asia, like France does, 2, 3 varieties, because people do not yet perceive the differences. And the differences that are a strength in the Western market, talking about wine, become a weakness. And so exactly, we did this task force where the wine producer would come discuss, and we would try to see how we can aggregate, do joint marketing, do joint trips. Being seen with me and other members of the government was already a good advantage for the wine producer that when talking to the Chinese counterpart, the Chinese side knew that they were in a way protected by myself and the other members of the government, and many others of these activities. On the
So one
side,
more, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but I just wanted to ask you, by the way, I can't imagine the Chinese not falling head over heels in love with the wonderful Barolo that you produce in Italy. But let me ask you, why was there this fright, if I may use the word, on at least the American media? You know, it said, here's the first NATO country, the first G7 country signing a memorandum. If this was the intent, it just makes so much sense. It makes Italy more powerful, your small companies more powerful. Why was there this negative, if I may say, reaction to the Memorandum of Understanding, at least on this side of the Atlantic?
I think a mix of reasons. One is maybe there was a misperception of what this memorandum was about. Our American friends thought this was a geopolitical shift, that Italy would tilt the axis away from NATO, the Atlantic, into pivot to Asia.
Right.
Absolutely not. A story completely made up. I tell you, because I did it, so I know why I did it, and I can guarantee there was no. So you're hearing firsthand. This was a fabricated narrative by the media that maybe our American friends, in a way, fell for it, because of course the media does influence politics. So
exactly.
This initial, let's say, misunderstanding, I did get on a plane a few times, go to Washington, New York, Boston, met with think tanks, government, and explain what we're doing. And I have to say, once we explained it, the narrative that was perceived by the American member of the government was a little bit softer. And I think it was concluded, yes, now we understand it. Maybe we could have discussed it before, but I think, I would say 80% understood that it was not what they thought it was. So issue cleared. I also have to say that the American administration was not really only taking a dispute with Italy because of the MOU, but with almost any country that had a trade surplus with the United States, because this was the policy, I respect, of President Trump. And so the former President Trump took an issue with France for the subsidies on Airbus, with Germany, a little bit on Italy for this MOU, then clarified, with China, of course, with India, with Vietnam, with Mexico, with Canada. So and then if we put this in context, I think that the misunderstanding that did occur between the United States and Italy is in a way diluted by the fact that the United States was taking a little bit more of a assertive approach on countries that had trade surplus with the United States. And I have to say, you know, Minister Lighthizer and Premier Liu He in China, they also did their own MOU. The Phase 1 agreement between the United States and China is exactly what I would have done if I had been in Mr. Lighthizer's shoes. Do a MOU, they call it Phase 1, but it's the same thing, an agreement that forces China to buy more US products. While
it's
absolutely right, in the interest of the United States producers, exporters. And of course, he didn't call me first to say, can I do it? And
they did it. But let me...
They doesn't have to do that. We also got a little bit worried because, of course, this creates a trade diversion. But then again, in a mirror sort of dialogues, we also clarified that United States had the whole right and in their own interest to do what it was good for their own economy. So, you know, everyone wants to do the same thing. Everyone wants to do business with China. And this does not mean in any way, and I emphasize in any way, to be not part of the Atlantic Alliance. Just because the US, which is the Atlantic, does exactly the same thing, wants to do more business with China. We are all on the same boat.
Let me ask, first of all, you make me feel very nostalgic when you say you got in a plane and went to Washington to explain. I wish we were able to do that. Those were the days, huh? But
Yes.
but leaving that aside, how do you see the future of the Memorandum of Understanding, Italy, China, seeing that you have now a new prime minister, Draghi, who is, of course, a banker, technocrat, but also very EU oriented. And the EU, it seems to me, is starting to take somewhat, though not completely, but somewhat of a posture, strong competitive posture against China. So can you just talk a little bit about how you see Italy's future involvement given Mario Draghi's government? Can you talk about that a bit?
Yes, I tell you, yes, Mr. Draghi is, of course, a highly respected individual in the European Union, in the world. And so his own very presence in the government already raises the profile of Italy to a different level altogether. Right. This is by no means no comparison with the old government. Everyone does their own jobs, and I'm sure Mr. Conte did the best he could, but of course, Mr. Draghi was the former governor of the central bank in Europe. So, right. And highly respected, and he's been in the international arena for many decades. So this is already very positive in Italy. This is positive also because you're right, the narrative and the discussion between Italy and Europe now can be brought to a more, you said, technical level. Right. No slogan, no Twitter. We cannot do foreign policy. We cannot do economic policy on Twitter, not on Facebook. We need to do it at the table with an Excel spreadsheet, with data analysis, pros and cons, and see what is the optimum way to solve problems. And I think this is exactly the approach that Italy will have with the European Union. And this is exactly what I've done while I was in the government, try to get rid of these ideological views, sometimes wrong, and go back to facts and numbers. Because, you know, so what, when we look at numbers, the negotiation is easier. 2 + 2 is 4 for both parties. And yes, I may not like the size, the shape of the 4. So 2 + 2, I say 2 + 2 is equal 4. I may not like the color of the 4. I may not like the shape, but we already have a path that smooth out, I think, 80–90% of the differences. Right. And the approach that Mr. Draghi will do is in along this line. That's why he chose some ministers that are out of political parties and very, very highly respected. So I think it's a positive season for
and continuity. So you expect continuity?
I do expect continuity. Of course, Mr. Draghi has not said much about the philosophy or the policies that we will implement. In fact, we are still in the making of the government. It's not fully formed.
Yes.
So we are still hour after hour, so we're still defining more the people and the policies, and then there will be a vote in parliament. So a little bit early to see what the policies will be, but you're right. His presence, Mr. Draghi presence already sets the scene for a more constructive approach with Europe.
And so a technical question here very quickly, because I have a couple of other points to talk to you about. So is the Memorandum of Understanding signed? It remains in force until the parties decide that they don't want the Memorandum of Understanding. So it just continues on. And I guess it's what Mr. Draghi wants to make of it. Is that how it works? It's there permanently?
The memorandum lives on. Theoretically, countries can pull out, but it would not be the right thing to do. Do you know why? Because also in the memorandum, I didn't say that. The wording of the memorandum is exactly what we in the West would like China to do. It talks about reciprocity, level playing field, equal access, climate change, all the things. Of course, these are just things on a piece of paper that need to be done, but this is what the memorandum is about. It's a framework that has words.
Yeah.
And the words are what we, the West, like to hear. I'll tell you something, to the point that when I was talking to the American friends in Washington, I said, listen, this MOU that Italy did is something that we offer you on a silver plate as a starting point for your own negotiation. If there's something you don't like, you want more strict enforcement, or you want more strict wording, you want to bring China more into our side, look at it and do more than this. But this is the starting point of the negotiation. I think this is a service, in a way, Italy did to the rest of Europe. In fact, after that, Switzerland and Luxembourg signed the own MOU. And European Union also recently the investment agreement with China.
Treaty. Indeed. I'm going to broaden the optic a bit, and I'm sorry I'm rushing you, but I do need to get a lot out of you. You're one of the few people that really understands China. You've lived there since 2008. You speak the language. And now I want to broaden the picture a bit, Michele. What I want to do is ask you, it's hard to believe, but China's 2,000-year history, excepting for 120 years or so when China was colonized and their progress was interrupted, China has been the world's largest producer, the richest country, all of that, right? So it has this long history. So in a sense, it is now returning to where it has always been. However, since in the last 200 years, the Western democracies have assumed the whole global stage with human rights, various other issues. And what I want to ask you is, China is, depending on how you count, the largest GDP, the biggest aviation market, half of, Ferrari is sold in Dolce. So how do we square the authoritarian, some of the very cruel, if I may, behavior that the media here reports? How do we square that with another power that is as tall as us, where we can sell a lot of things? How do we make this work? You understand China a lot, so I want to ask you this question.
It's a very good question. I think the way the advice I feel to tell the people that are watching is that we need to look at China from 2 points of view. The West normally looks at a comparison of China now with the West now. And we are unhappy about it. We say China is behind in rule of law, in the rights of laborers, pollution, etc. And so we get frustrated in emission, and we say China is not doing the right things. And so we complain. This is the cross-section analysis, using a technical term, comparing China now with the West now. The other way to look at it is, like you said, the time evolution, and see what China has been doing over the last, let's say, 44 years, since 1978, the progress that is made. And we then have to ask ourselves if we want to judge the path, not the status quo, but the progression and the evolution. And I think depends on whether you choose the like-for-like comparison now, or looking at China over time, you end up with completely different answers. In the first situation, you will be very unhappy because China doesn't do the thing we want. In the second situation, you say, wow, China is doing things now that has a GDP per capita of $10,000 that we in the West never dreamt of doing when our GDP was $10,000 per capita.
I see what you're saying.
We were not worrying about green. We were making things dirty. Surely we did not have the fullest development of democracies. We were coming out of the World War, 2 decades into that. I'm talking about 10,000 GDP per capita, varies a lot. We were not really doing, free flow of capital, reciprocity, open access to market. We had nothing of that. We were protectionists. We were mercantilists in a way. You could not take money from Italy to France freely up to a few decades ago. So when we look at this different status of development of China now, 10,000 GDP per capita, with what in the West were doing at the time, then the answer is a little bit happier. He said, well, maybe China is doing more than we did, and this is almost a fact in many areas, not all, but we can take a more positive approach because we see the progression. The other thing is that we need to understand if we, and I say we, a country, how much they should interfere into the domestic affair of another country. And this is something very different from the East and the West. In the West, we do feel the responsibility that we need to impose or convince or persuade our economic models, political, whatever, into the developing world, because we think we know it better.
So you're talking now about issues like the Uyghurs in Xinjiang and the rule of law in Hong Kong, those kinds of issues that seem to be coloring the commercial relationship.
These are issues that, yes, indeed, they are currently in the commercial relationship, but it's even more than just that. These are maybe examples that are important. I don't think they're very well understood either. I'm talking also more about, even, free election, democracy, the economic model, the free market versus the capitalist economy. So we think that the free market, the liberalism in trade is the winning. And China says, no, we have a mix of state and the market economy. And so we have this philosophical conflict of China. It's not just in the merit, but it's also in the method. We have two different economic and political models. We have democracies, we have some kind of free market. China is not an electoral democracy, and it does not have a 100% free market. It has more of a state economy. These are the differences in the merit. And then there is a difference in method. We think that we should convince other people to do what we do. And China says, no, everyone does what they want in their own home. And this is the biggest friction.
Okay, so following up on that.
Sorry.
No. I just want to make sure I have one more big area to cover, and I rudely am interrupting you, but I must get to this. So I wanted to ask you, I've been thinking that China and the US and perhaps also the EU, that we should think of some very large projects that we can work together with China, right? So that we at least start a thaw and put some of these things aside and work on issues that might help all of us. So if you were to suggest a couple of items for the Biden administration in this very young time in their administration, a couple of items along the lines of building bridges with China, what might they be? Just a couple of thoughts from you.
Green. This, I think we have an alignment of both political and economic interest in the United States with Biden that is rejoining the multilateral tables. So this is a positive development.
Right.
With Europe, the Green New Deal with Ursula von der Leyen, and we have this recovery plan. A lot will be on green. China, Xi Jinping has promised the carbon neutral by 2060, so China is going green. So we have these three major economic blocks in the world that have the political push and the economic advantage to do it. And this is a little bit like 40 years ago. We had the same thing with Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and Deng Xiaoping. They opened up a little bit in different ways.
Yes.
Their own economies, again, in the three main blocks, the US, Europe, with Thatcher and other German and French leaders, and China. And that's why the world became more market-oriented. Now it's a second chance, 40 years later, three leaders to try to push this agenda. So green, for me, is the thing that has the strongest political support, and is not, like you say, it's easy to agree. It really has a very few areas where people would fight. And so if you want to do the right thing and coordinate the effort, it's a topic that is not, let's say, controversial, like, for example, technology, semiconductor could be. If we talk about semiconductor, 7 nanometers, 5 nanometers technology, we will never get rid of this dispute. So, like Deng Xiaoping said, let's leave this to later conversation. Let's talk first of the thing that we can agree. And I think green is one of them. And the second one, you asked me to, is Africa. Again, a continent that really, from an economic and an ethical point of view, double bottom approach deserves and needs cooperation of the northern part of the world. I put China in the north, Europe and the US. We do have interest. We have, the West has not been the best player in Africa over the last several centuries. I think this is the time. Again, it's not just charity, but we need a stable Africa. We have migrant problem. We want a market to develop because our economies in Europe are going down minus 10%. So we want Africa to be prosperous in their own interest and in our own interest. And this is again where the cooperation between the three blocks can come into act. If the Americans and the other countries don't like the name Silk Road or Belt and Road, let's not say that. Let's just do cooperation for the development of Ethiopia, of Nigeria. There is a population that's going to double in a few decades. And let's just bring African people the prosperity that they deserve. And they never had over the last centuries.
What a joy it is to talk with you. You bring the sunshine into this very wintry day here. I'm afraid that we have run out of time. I want to thank my wonderful educational instructor, professor, politician guest, Michele Geraci, for taking the time to be here from Shanghai. He's in China as we speak. And I just want to tell all the viewers who joined us today, thank you very much for joining us. I would urge you to go to my website, kashmeri.com, to look at a list of upcoming events on this US China EU series. And I hope to see all of you again next week. Until then, goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.